Good afternoon. This is Midday Report on TVP World, live from Warsaw. I'm Marie Kato. Earlier today, Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski delivered his annual foreign policy speech to the Polish Parliament, outlining the country's foreign strategy as geopolitical alliances, support for Ukraine and deeper cooperation with the EU. Our reporter Kazimierz Wysiak was at the Polish Parliament and brings us the latest.
Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski delivered his annual speech here in the Polish Parliament, laying out the priorities of Poland when it comes to its foreign policies for the year 2026. In the speech, the Polish Foreign Minister, I would say, focused on four main areas: the threat coming from Russia, the support of Ukraine, stronger cooperation with the European Union, and changing transatlantic relations with the United States. But the Polish Foreign Minister began his speech by once again stating clearly that Russia continues to be the biggest existential threat, not only for Ukraine, but also for Poland and the rest of Europe.
Zwycięstwo Kijowa będzie naszym zwycięstwem.
Kyiv's victory will be our victory. Contrary to what their propaganda says, Russia is not winning at all. Let's not be fooled. Russia has never been and isn't invincible. Let me remind you that in the 20th century alone, Russia lost a war to Japan in 1905, World War I, the Polish Bolshevik War in 1920, the war in Afghanistan, and the Cold War.
In the second half of his speech, the Polish Foreign Minister also talked a lot about relations with the European Union, said that Poland is becoming a bigger and bigger leader in the EU, and directed some words towards the conservative right-wing parties in the Polish Parliament. The Polish Foreign Minister also focused a lot on the relations with the United States and the transatlantic unity, while he said that the US will continue to be Poland's most important strategic partner. At the same time, he couldn't help but notice that the relations with the US are changing, that US President Donald Trump, for example, is imposing tariffs on Europe or threatening to take over Greenland. So while these issues are being worked on between Europe and the US, the Polish Foreign Minister said, and I quote here, "We can't be suckers."
Jeśli Japonię z roku 1940
of Ukraine's borders. If the Japan of 1945 were replaced by today's China, are we certain that the interests of the United States will be identical to those of Poland? We have been and will remain a loyal ally to America, but we cannot be suckers.
Later, after the speech, I asked the Polish Foreign Minister if he could expand on this statement of the fact that the US will continue to be Poland's biggest ally, but we can't be suckers. And the Polish Foreign Minister gave me a very brief answer saying, I think that speaks for itself. So overall, we can see that Poland will continue to be a staunch supporter of Ukraine, that Poland still views Russia as the biggest existential threat. And at the same time, while Poland wants to be a leader in the EU and to have good relations with the United States, the Polish Foreign Minister knows that these relations with the US are worsening, even though Poland would like for these relations to be as good as they could be. From Warsaw, Kazimierz Wysiak, TVP World.
Following Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski's annual foreign policy expose on Thursday morning, Prime Minister Donald Tusk commented that the foreign minister highlighted key issues pertaining to the war in Ukraine and Poland's stance towards security and its relationship with its allies.
A war is raging just beyond our borders and, as Minister Sikorski emphasized today, affects us in a direct way. We're already paying a high price for this war. I'm talking not only about victims, but the staggering losses of the Polish economy and the very real threat of further Russian aggression. This is common knowledge, not some abstractions. That's why a key point in not just this particular address, but the broader debate is the question of how to sensibly, while at the same time massively, invest in Polish defence capabilities. Minister Sikorski left no doubt as to the strategic direction that Poland is moving in. Poland is a strong leader in this part of Europe. It's a part of united Europe and remains a loyal ally to the US, but not a naive one. We will not be suckers, as Minister Sikorski put it.
Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has issued an open letter to Volodymyr Zelenskyy, accusing the Ukrainian president of pushing anti-Hungarian policies. Orban has urged the Ukrainian president to reopen the Druzhba pipeline used by Slovakia and Hungary to receive Russian oil.
Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has issued an open letter to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, accusing him of attacking Hungary's energy security. This, of course, refers to the Druzhba pipeline, also known as the Friendship Pipeline, the Russian gas transport route to Hungary and Slovakia, which was damaged by Russian forces back in January, according to Ukrainian authorities.
I urge you to immediately reopen the Friendship oil pipeline and refrain from any further attacks on Hungary's energy security.
Hungary and Slovakia have long been encouraged to reduce their dependency on Russian oil, including by the Polish president, who believes relying on the Kremlin in terms of natural resources would be detrimental to Poland.
Poland can soon become an energy hub for the whole of Central and Eastern Europe, thanks to the Świnoujście terminal and the Baltic Sea's currently under construction floating terminal. Continuing to use Russian oil is a threat to both Europe's general and energy security, but it's also detrimental to Polish interests.
In his letter, Orban also accused Ukraine of meddling with Hungary's upcoming general elections.
We also see that you, Brussels, and the Hungarian opposition are coordinating efforts to bring a pro-Ukraine government to power in Hungary.
Experts say Orban's letter is a bit over the top.
This dramatization of the situation is purposeful, mostly due to the mobilization of domestic voters, both in Hungary and in Slovakia.
This was echoed by the Polish foreign minister.
There's this anti-Ukrainian mass psychosis being constructed by Hungary's government-controlled media. They're pushing a narrative that Ukraine could attack Hungary. I think these are desperate attempts of a populist movement that prides itself on attacking victims of aggression.
The European Union has already convened a meeting of technical experts from all member states to address the dispute over Druzhba, all the while encouraging Kyiv to repair the damages as soon as possible.
The worst of the winter may be slowly coming to an end, but it's still cold and Russia continues to attack Ukraine. Last night it fired a barrage of drones and missiles at Ukraine's energy sector and railway infrastructure, wounding dozens of people, damaging residential buildings and triggering fires. We now go live to our correspondent in Ukraine, Oz Chatterjee, to tell us more about this latest attack. Good afternoon, Oz. What can you tell us about this new wave of strikes?
Well, one person killed, 33 injured in attacks over the last 24 hours. The Ukrainian authorities say Russia launched 420 drones and 39 missiles of various types into Ukrainian territory in the early hours of Thursday morning. As you rightly said, residential buildings were damaged by this attack. President Zelenskyy said Russia once again waged war against critical infrastructure and ordinary residential buildings. Now, many people have been left without power across the country. Those areas most affected are Dnipropetrovsk, Donetsk, Kharkiv, Odessa, Zaporizhia and Poltava regions, all impacted by attacks on energy infrastructure, reducing energy supply to people. And as you can see, it's still very cold here in Ukraine. Snow still melting. We're starting to reach above 0 degrees, but still very, very cold in many people's houses, particularly the further east you go. So it's been another day of difficult attacks for the Ukrainians. Meanwhile, this is taking place as US and Ukrainian delegations meet in Geneva for further talks. The US talking to the Ukrainians about post-war reconstruction and the funds needed to do that. But the big issue with talking about post-war reconstruction now is we are nowhere near the end of the war. And Russia keeps destroying Ukrainian infrastructure. So whatever can be earmarked for potential reconstruction funds in the future won't be enough, because Russia keeps destroying any potential infrastructure and adding more and more costs to that ever-growing bill. So again, another difficult day for the Ukrainians as Russia continues to target energy infrastructure and residential neighborhoods across Ukraine.
Oz Chatterjee, thank you for joining us and thanks for the update. With the EU ban on Russian natural gas looming on the horizon, the US is working hard to supplant Moscow as the leading supplier of fuel for Central and Eastern Europe. This amounts to a seismic shift across the region, which historically has been dependent on Russian energy.
What you see is a very unusual gathering. 13 ministers from Central, Eastern and Southern Europe, together with the US Energy Secretary in Washington, D.C., determined to work together in the area of energy. Meaning, farewell Russian gas, welcome American LNG.
It's only a continuation of a long-term process of diversifying away from Russian gas in Central and Eastern Europe with the help of Americans, which are the patrons of such move since like 2 decades.
Poland already gets most of its LNG, or a super-cooled natural gas, from the US. 62 ships carrying the stuff have moored at the country's sole LNG terminal in Świnoujście last year. And the country is the prime example of doing away with Russian energy, something Warsaw has been working hard to achieve for the past decade.
In 2015, 80% of the natural gas Poland imported came from Russia. Today this figure is 0, and still the country's energy needs are secured.
And with Europe turning away from Russian natural gas on the back of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Washington wants to seize the opportunity and take Moscow's place as the region's main supplier.
Americans are demanding that their allies are buying American LNG, and they are fighting the competition. We have different suppliers, including Qatari and Norwegian partners, and Americans want to be the first choice.
But the CEE still has many staunch supporters of Russia, including Hungary, Slovakia and Serbia. But even their representatives signed the letter in Washington. Slovakia and Hungary really have no other choice. EU law demands they stop buying Russian gas in 2027. And both countries have alternative transit routes to cover their needs.
When it comes to Hungary, it is only a question of political will, because since many years, Hungary is connected to infrastructure that is allowing them to import oil or natural gas outside of Russia.
Serbia just extended its gas supply contract with Russia, but once the country is connected to Greek LNG terminals via a pipeline through North Macedonia, they will let American gas in. All this amounts to nothing short of a revolution.
Looking at the history, we've had the pipeline axis from east to west connecting the Russian resources with the customers in Europe. Now we have a revolution when it comes to the gas infrastructure in Central and Eastern Europe. We are having a growing axis from north to south, connected by multiple LNG terminals.
In other words, plenty to choose from to keep Russia out.
Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko took to the ice with his presidential hockey team and was afforded the opportunity to bask in a carefully manufactured moment of sporting triumph.
The 71-year-old was afforded an extraordinary amount of time to compose himself in front of the opponent's goal before scoring, as opposing players circled nearby with conspicuous restraint. The president's team, which also included Alexander's son Nikolai, put on a highly choreographed, propagandistic spectacle in Belarus's Republican Hockey League, in which the president's team predictably lead the standings. Footage from the match with Vitebsk Oblast showed fans rigidly chanting, dressed inauthentically in matching fresh sportswear that was likely distributed to attendees prior to the match. The willingness to afford Lukashenko so much space might partially owe to an incident in December, in which Lukashenko was accidentally knocked over by a teammate, a mistake players now appear particularly keen not to replicate. Being granted ample time and space on the ice is an experience familiar to Lukashenko's close ally Vladimir Putin, who was similarly permitted to amass goals at will during a 2021 match featuring both leaders. In Belarusian hockey, as in Belarusian politics, the official outcome rarely aligns with reality.
That's all for Midday Report today. Thank you for joining us and stay tuned for much more on TVP World. Goodbye.